our next guest is, again, someone of extraordinary data science capabilities and backgrounds, Victoria Gamerman. Hi, Victoria, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me.
And she heads up the data governance and insights group and work at Boehringer Ingelheim. And Victoria, let's start off again. The audience is really interested in what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing at BI.
Absolutely. And I think that the last part of what you were just talking about is an excellent transition to some of the work that I'm doing. Now, before I start, I will, go through my traditional disclosure. So, of course, the views here are represent my own perspectives and my personal opinions, not those of Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a place that I enjoy working. And so let me tell you a little bit about data governance and insights, because oftentimes, right, when data governance works well, people don't really think about it. When it doesn't work well, people complain about it. But we've taken an excellent, I think, a really unique approach to how we think about data governance. My skill set, my strength, my passion is in being a healthcare data translator and a dot connector. And that's really one of the things that we're finding as this digital revolution and evolution, especially out of what we've seen from COVID. So in my role right now, I'm accountable for shaping the data governance and the data strategy for clinical development as it relates to our organizational digital transformation. Historically, of course, I have come from a more of a data science statistics background and led a team of what we would now maybe call data scientists, looking at use cases of how we can take either historic clinical trial data or external real world healthcare data sources and figure out how we can help drug development. And so that's really my passion and what I'd love to share with you all today.
Brilliant. That is wonderful. I think right now, data science is the hot topic in the world. Everyone knows that 80% of the world's data has been generated over the last 2 years because of the virtualization of everything with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And 30% of that data is healthcare data. So healthcare with remote patient monitoring, electronic health records, telemedicine, and certainly the virtualization of the supply chain
Yep.
has absolutely been a major factor. And you're at the front end of that with the digitalization of healthcare. How has the digitalization revolutionized the healthcare industry, and how will it in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question. I'm not a futurist, but what I would say about what I can tell you and what I've seen over the past 5 years is, and probably even a little bit longer, we've seen this coming, right? And what that is we used to think about healthcare as a case by case, right? A doctor might get a patient, and that would be the case that they would treat. And when it comes to then rare conditions or things that are less common, that could get really hard. What we're seeing now and more of today is the ability to actually leverage data that's collected in different places and bring it together so that our insights are maybe more robust. Maybe there are, insights that are around a specific subgroup of a diseased population or a specific trait and characteristic of a disease. So to me, no matter how you define digital, which is an argument in and of itself, what you really are able to see and what you will see in the future is that there will be this more of an ecosystem and a systems thinking approach as applied to healthcare data.
Okay, yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and that's a lot to really unpack there. And certainly, when you look at this, obviously BI is such a patient-centric organization. How do you see this affecting patients down the line?
My hope is that what we can really do is work with a variety of partners and technologies. There's one business approach of trying to ingest different startups, for example, and we see that that is an approach that some companies take. Another that looks more at partnering, and maybe a third model where you try to develop those kinds of algorithms in-house. At the end of the day, you have to look at the portfolio you have, the approaches and tailor the approaches of how you might partner from a business model perspective to the portfolio you have and the strength and skill set of that portfolio. And from my perspective, keeping the patient in mind, and really I would even take it a step beyond and say, keeping the patient-physician relationship in mind, right? As a patient myself, I'm not just a number, I'm not just a data point. I live in a world, I have a job, I have responsibilities, I have my healthcare plan if I'm lucky, right? And have that opportunity, or I might not. I have my socioeconomic factors, my, social determinants of health, all of those things that make up what is a patient. And I think the more emphasis a variety of organizations are putting on collaborations with patient advocacy groups, and just in general, looking beyond just their walls, the more tailored we can make the medicines and how we develop them and how they will then be used to what patients really need today and maybe down further down the road.
That's incredible. And along those lines, we're talking about the pandemic really being the the COVID-19 and coronavirus pandemic being the first pandemic of the digital age.
Yeah.
And certainly, from your perspective, do you think we've made use of innovative technologies to enhance the epidemiological and analytical surveillance that's needed?
You know, I think that there's been a lot of wonderful innovations that have come out of this. To me, that is one of the unfortunate but silver linings of this situation that we've all found ourselves in. There's a lot of push that came on our health system to look at and think about how we do things. And part of that has also allowed us to identify challenges, challenges either in the supply chain, weaknesses in how we deliver information, and how we encourage compliant behavior. Go get your second shot if you got one of the vaccines that had a first shot, for example. And all of those things, I think, give us insight in a very large sample size relative to what one might get for a rare disease trial. So the innovations and the ability to adopt certain technologies has definitely been accelerated. The question that remains to be seen is, to what extent do regulators keep some of those innovations forward and keep the dialogue going? Because a lot of what we have to do also has to include for us that partnership between the regulator and the drug developer. And so it'll be very interesting to observe and see what kinds of adaptations will keep going forward and where the emphasis will be. My hope is that certain approaches like virtual or decentralized trials will remain, or some hybrid of that, right? We don't have to take it all at once, but making sure we are moving forward will be the most important.
Yeah, and we've seen tremendous jumps in data sciences, and you've been at the forefront of that, really revolutionizing how it's utilized within life sciences, and certainly those components. What's the long-term future look like for data science in healthcare, and more specifically in drug development and distribution?
Yep. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to explore if we take the model of going a bit more agile, right? We've now evolved, I think, in a lot of organizations to try to adopt that agile software development mindset. So if we can look at what is the use case and think about how it can be scalable, I think we can take a bite-sized risk with a potential very big long-term gain. And from an AI and machine learning perspective too, I think there is the chance that and the opportunity to make some of these things a bit more explainable, right? There's this concept of, how the explainability issue, and how do we partner the physician and the patient and their experience with the data and the data-driven approaches, right? There's this balance we need to take where you can't just have an algorithm necessarily predict that someone will have X, Y, and Z. There is a level of insight that comes into play and a level of trust. So that will be very interesting to see how those issues will be addressed, and lots of, I think, opportunity there by going from this more, you know, hypothesis testing models you were just talking about, and
Yeah.
going into more of a hypothesis creation, hypothesis generation approach.
That's really critical, and I think one of the questions that we're seeing coming in through LinkedIn. And again, if folks have questions too, do either knock on the door on LinkedIn, or come through the chat box here, or the Q&A box here. But it's around the definition of data science. There's a lot of different definitions of data science out there today. How are you defining it in your daily activities at Boehringer Ingelheim?
So what we're trying to do is actually be very inclusive. And really we have different groups, different parts of the organization that have data science teams. And the point is really around connecting those people. Everyone has different parts of the organization have their own different objectives. But at the end of the day, everyone needs to use data, everyone needs analytics. And so it's about creating a community where we're open, where we're sharing our approaches in terms of the limitations of our own internal systems, our own internal access to a variety of software, programming languages. We have various communities that we've created around that. So from my personal perspective, a data scientist can be any data enthusiast. It doesn't have to have a rigid, structure. You may or may not need a PhD, but what you need is that passion, that curiosity, that mindset, and then of course the infrastructure around that and knowing where your limitations are. I think a lot of, you know, insights that may come, we have to have that also, not just that gut instant check, right? You can't just say, oh, for this disease, everyone clearly is a vegan. Well, that may or may not be the case, but it needs to have some, robustness in also the clinical medical world for us in our application area, and a variety of others in terms of what was the assumptions that you looked at for a particular model, et cetera. So for us, it's about a community leveraging our network. Some people may have a PhD in one or the other thing, and others may have a ton of Python practical experience. And together we're creating these agile, very robust teams that can deliver on what we need.
That's really a lot, and we have about 2 minutes left, and I've got to ask this because it's it's one of the cornerstones from the research that I'm doing around digital in life sciences, especially with the development of a vaccine for COVID, actually several in less than a year, which is stunning. I think most of the folks
Yeah.
around the world don't realize that had we not digitized over the last 25 years, really since the dot-com boom of the 95 through 99, 2000 era, we could have never done this. And you're on the inside. Tell the audience a little bit about how machine learning and algorithms and the digitization of the R&D spectrum, kind of pre-commercial, pre-submission, really did make and is making a drug development faster, better than ever before.
Absolutely. And I would say even to that point, Stan, a lot of that is also ongoing. It's going to get better. It's going to get faster, with the technology, as you had said. There's been many, many advances. Think about it just from my perspective of the data layer. It used to be the case even during the early dot-com boom where the data had to be physically aggregated in one place. Now imagine trying to truly query a large big data set that everything had to be in the same physical, row per patient, lots of variables, lots of, columns of multiple data. And think about how quickly you do that when you do a Google search. So the ability of our data to not necessarily have to be physically co-located, but actually to be connected through either tokens or other technologies, other analytical approaches in and of itself has allowed us to do things much more quickly when we can really establish a data fabric layer of that data and have those connections be more logical as opposed to physical. That has in and of itself made a huge and dramatic impact. And then of course, like you're mentioning, along the full drug life cycle, the ability to be able to take that data and understand, okay, this site, this is what we know about that site. And we have the data around it. It's not on a paper form. You don't have to go look it up. You don't have to call someone up. We can get access for the right people at the right time to the information that they need. That just really has sped up our ability to be able to do the computations and get the data, for example, to the data scientists who are, developing these algorithms in real time.
That's incredible. And thank you very much, Victoria, for joining us. And again, everyone listening, the audience, please do connect with Victoria on LinkedIn. We can only say that she is elite when it comes to data science and life sciences. We followed the data scientists around life sciences, payers, providers, et cetera, all the time at the lab. And it's very rare to find someone with Victoria's experience and obviously extraordinary communication skills. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you for having me. Really great to meet everyone. Take care.